Hey guys, tonight we're going on a journey back in time, not to the kings and castles, but to the mud-floored homes of medieval peasants. We're going to crawl into their world as the first hints of winter arrive and experience what it was like to survive the brutal, unforgiving cold. Just try to imagine it. You're in a tiny, one-room hovel. The smoke from a meager fire stings your eyes, and through the cracks in the wall, you feel a sharp, cold wind that seems to cut right through your clothes. You probably wouldn't survive this. But don't worry, we're just visiting. You're about to discover a history that's far from the fairy tales and much more about scraping by. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You feel it first in the air, a subtle shift, a crispness that wasn't there yesterday. You've been toiling in the fields since dawn, the sun a distant, watery orb that offers little warmth. As you straighten your aching back, you see a thin layer of white frost on the blades of grass that escaped the final reaping. It's a silent, beautiful warning. It's the first frost, and it means the time for preparation is over. The time for action is now. Your hovel, a simple, wattle and daub hut with a thatched roof, feels both like a sanctuary and a flimsy shield against the coming storm. You know its flaws intimately, the gaps in the walls where the dried mud has crumbled away, the way the straw roof has thinned in spots. It's a structure you built with your own hands, and now it's up to you to prepare it for a battle it might not win. Your first thought, of course, is the fire. The hearth is the beating heart of your entire existence. Without it, you are nothing. So, you trudge back towards the village, your well-worn leather shoes squelching in the mud, a sense of urgency prickling at your skin. Your neighbours are doing the same, their faces etched with the same combination of fatigue and grim determination. You see a woman pulling a cart piled high with gnarled branches and a man dragging a large log, the friction of the bark scraping against the dirt. A mainstream historical fact is that the average peasant home in medieval Europe was often less than 200 square feet, and it wasn't uncommon for a family of 5 or more to live, cook, and sleep in that single, smoky room. That's smaller than many modern garages, and you're sharing it with your family. Maybe a pig, and the occasional chicken. Sounds cozy, right? Like a fun, communal camping trip that lasts for 5 months. As you approach your hovel, you start to assess its weaknesses with a critical eye. The chimney, a simple hole in the roof, is letting out a wisp of smoke, a sign that the fire within is barely hanging on. You remember your father telling you a quirky tidbit about how some Anglo-Saxon homes didn't even have a chimney, just a hole in the roof, which meant that the entire dwelling would be constantly filled with a hazy layer of wood smoke, preserving the thatch and sometimes the people, too. Though probably not in a good way. The constant inhalation of that smoke must have been an absolute delight for your lungs. Historians still argue whether the smoke's preservative qualities were a deliberate design choice or just a happy side effect of their limited construction techniques. You hope it was the latter. Inside, the light is dim, filtering in through a small, shuttered opening. Glass is for lords, not for you. You can see your wife tending to a small pot over the fire, and your children are huddled near the warmth. Their faces a mix of worry and childlike curiosity. You set down the bundle of dry reeds you've gathered and begin the slow, meticulous work of patching. You mix a bit of mud with straw and dung, a surprisingly effective sealant, and begin to plaster over the most glaring gaps in the wall. You press the cold, slimy mixture into the cracks, feeling the sharp wind on your fingers as you work. It's a race against time and temperature. You know that if you don't seal these gaps, the wind will not only steal your precious heat, but will also blow out the fire, which would be a catastrophe of monumental proportions. You can't let that happen. The very survival of your family depends on this. You work until your hands are raw and your back screams in protest. Knowing this is just the beginning of a long and difficult preparation, the sun dips below the horizon, and the air immediately becomes frigid. You huddle inside with your family, the fire a precious, flickering promise of warmth. The real fight has just begun. As the first frost settles, you and your family are part of a massive, collective push. The fields, which have given you life all summer, are now a barren landscape of brittle stalks and frozen dirt. The last crops, particularly root vegetables like turnips and carrots, must be pulled from the ground before the frost penetrates too deeply, making them impossible to harvest. You feel the cold seeping into your leather gloves as you yank on a turnip top. The resistance from the frozen soil a stubborn reminder of the season's power. It's back-breaking work, and every hand in the village is needed. Small children, with their tiny, nimble fingers, are tasked with collecting stray fallen apples or gathering the last of the dry herbs. Your eldest son, just a boy but with a man's strength, helps you pull a heavily loaded handcart back toward the village, the wooden wheels groaning in protest. You and the other villagers form a kind of human conveyor belt, passing baskets and bundles of food along to the storage areas, a frantic race against the inevitable. This frantic, final harvest is not just about food, it's about a deep, instinctual need to prepare, to hoard, to ensure your survival. You and your neighbors barely exchange words. You don't need to. The urgency is understood. The air is thick with the sounds of grunts, the rustle of dry leaves, and the rhythmic thud of root vegetables being dropped into baskets. It's a moment of pure, primal focus. A mainstream historical fact is that the vast majority of a peasant's diet consisted of cereal grains, mainly wheat, rye, and barley, which were used to make the coarse bread and porridge that formed the basis of every meal. You've already harvested and threshed most of the grain, but every single stray head of wheat is now a treasure, and you make sure none are left behind. You gather them by hand, careful not to lose a single kernel, because you know that a few handfuls of grain today could be the difference between a full stomach and a grumbling emptiness later on. You can't help but think about the animals, the pigs, the chickens, the solitary cow if you're lucky enough to have one. They all need to be fed through the winter, and their feed, too, has to be gathered. You collect acorns from the base of the oak trees and save the vegetable tops for the cow. It's a constant, careful calculus of resources. This whole process is a logistical nightmare that has to be executed perfectly, or the consequences are dire. A quirky tidbit is that medieval peasants often planted special winter rye, a hardier grain that could survive the cold and be harvested much earlier in the spring. This gave them a crucial food source during the Hungry Gap, the period right before the main spring harvest when last year's stores were at their lowest. It was a clever, if desperate, way to stretch the meager bounty of the land. It's not just about what you grow, it's about how you grow it, and the very rhythms of your life are dictated by these cycles of planting and reaping as the sun sets. You feel a profound sense of exhaustion, but also a tiny glimmer of satisfaction. The granary, a simple, elevated shed to protect the grain from vermin, is fuller than it was yesterday. The root cellar, a pit dug into the ground and lined with straw, is starting to fill up. You know it's still not enough, but it's a start. Historians still argue whether the concept of collective land management and shared labor, so common in medieval villages, was a conscious, organized system or just a natural consequence of the intense pressures of survival. You're not sure, but you know that without the help of your neighbors, you would have failed. This is not an individual effort, it is a community effort, a shared struggle against a common enemy. A woman shouts a tired joke about the size of her husband's turnips, and for a moment, the tension breaks, and a few weary laughs escape into the cold air. But the laughter is short-lived. The work isn't done yet, and the winter has barely begun. The cart is loaded, your back is aching, and you trudge back towards the flickering light of your hovel, your mind already on the next phase of winter preparation. Every step is a prayer that you've done enough. With the final harvest secured, your world now narrows to the inside of your home and the immediate surroundings. The air outside is now a weapon, and your focus shifts entirely to preserving the food you've so laboriously gathered. This isn't just a matter of storing things, it's a form of medieval chemistry, a desperate race against rot and pests. You start with the most precious commodity, meat. The final slaughter of the year has taken place, the unfortunate pig you raised. It squeals, a mournful soundtrack to the village. Now its meat must be preserved. You and your wife rub large, coarse salt into every surface of the hams and sides of bacon. The salt is a luxury, a precious commodity, but it's essential. This process, a mainstream historical fact, is a time-honored tradition known as salting or curing, and it draws out the moisture, making the meat uninhabitable for the bacteria that would otherwise spoil it. The salty air hangs in your small hovel, a promise of future meals and a reminder of the recent sacrifice. You then turn your attention to the herbs and vegetables. Bundles of sage, thyme, and rosemary hang from the rafters of your hovel, drying in the smoky warmth from the fire. These aren't just for flavor, they are for medicine, and their pungent aroma is a small comfort in the cramped space. The turnips and carrots are packed into the root cellar, nestled in layers of straw and sand to keep them from freezing and to extend their freshness for as long as possible. You and your wife spend hours in the dim light of the cellar, checking each vegetable for blemishes, discarding any that show signs of rot. It's a meticulous, repetitive task, but you know that one bad turnip could spoil a whole bushel. This whole process is about creating a tiny, self-sustaining ecosystem within your home, a bubble of survival against the vast, cold emptiness outside. A quirky tidbit is that peasants would sometimes use ash from their fires to preserve certain foods. The lye in the ash acted as a mild preservative, and it was a way of using every single bit of a resource. A testament to the ingenuity born of necessity. Imagine that, your dinner is preserved with the leftovers from your breakfast fire. It's a kind of resourceful recycling that makes you appreciate your modern-day refrigerator with its fancy crisper drawer and humidity control. Historians still argue whether these preservation methods, particularly those involving ash and other folk techniques, were truly effective, or if they were more a matter of tradition and hope. You can't afford to hope, you can only afford to work. Your family gathers around the fire as you and your wife continue this task, the smell of salt and dried herbs filling the air. Your children watch with a mixture of boredom and fascination, absorbing these lessons of survival that will one day be their own to execute. There are no written recipes, no detailed instructions in a book. This knowledge is passed down from parent to child, a continuous chain of survival forged through generations of brutal winters. The fire crackles, and you listen to the sounds of your family. The gentle rustle of straw, the clatter of a wooden bowl. You think about the food you've preserved, the salted pork hanging from a hook, the dried fish, the vegetables in the cellar. It's all a form of insurance, a bet that you've done enough to see the spring. The thought is both reassuring and terrifying, because you know how fragile that bet is. The cold is a patient enemy, and it has months to test the strength of your preparations. Now that the harvest is in and the food is salted and stored, your world shrinks to the small, smoky confines of your hovel. And at the very heart of this world is the hearth. It's not just a fireplace, it's the sun of your indoor universe. As you and your family huddle around it, you feel the warmth radiating not just into your skin, but into your very bones. This hearth is where your meals are cooked, where your clothes are dried, and where the endless, dark nights are held at bay. The firelight flickers on the faces of your family, casting long, dancing shadows that make the familiar room feel both cozy and a little eerie. There's a certain magic to it, a primal connection to a source of life in the face of deathly cold. Without this simple, mud and stone-lined pit, you would not last a single week. The hearth is a living entity, demanding constant attention and respect. You must feed it, protect it, and manage its heat. The heat isn't just for cooking, it's a tool for survival. A mainstream historical fact is that many medieval peasant homes were designed with the hearth in the center, not on a wall, which allowed the heat to radiate more efficiently into the single, open room. This design was a pragmatic solution to a constant problem, a silent acknowledgement that every degree of warmth was a victory against the cold. You watch the flames dance, a mesmerizing ballet of red and orange, and the thought occurs to you that your life is tied to this fire as surely as a sailor's life is tied to the sea. The fire is your only defense, your last line of a very long and difficult winter. Of course, the hearth isn't all comfort and warmth. It's also the source of the one-room hovel's most significant drawback, the smoke. With no proper chimney, just a hole in the roof, the smoke from the fire tends to linger, a thick, sooty haze that coats everything, your clothes, your furniture, your hair, even the very air you breathe, all carry the scent of wood smoke. A quirky tidbit is that this persistent smoke wasn't always seen as a negative. The smoke rising into the thatched roof acted as a natural insecticide, keeping bugs and other vermin from making a home in the straw. So, the constant sting in your eyes and the slightly blackened lungs were, in a way, a trade-off for a pest-free roof. Isn't that just a wonderful medieval reality check? You're basically fumigating your house with your own breathing. Historians still argue whether this constant exposure to smoke had a more significant impact on the health of peasants than the cold itself. You don't have time to ponder such things. You just know that your eyes burn, and your throat is often dry. Your wife is cooking a simple porridge, a mixture of barley and water, and the smell is a rare, welcome aroma in the smoky air. You use the hearth not just for cooking, but for warmth, a quiet place to sit and mend your worn-out clothes by the light of the flames. This is where you tell stories to your children, where you sing songs and pass on the oral traditions of your village. The hearth is the great equalizer, the source of both your physical survival and your mental fortitude. It's a place of community, of family, and of quiet, desperate hope. As the fire crackles, you pull a log closer, its weight a heavy reminder of the work that is still to come. You know that keeping this fire going is the single most important task of the winter. The hearth is the heart of your home, but it's a hungry one. It demands constant fuel, and finding that fuel is a major part of your winter struggle. As a peasant, you don't have the luxury of a vast, well-stocked woodshed. A mainstream historical fact is that peasants had strict rules and limitations on where they could gather wood. They couldn't simply wander into the Lord's forest and chop down a tree. Instead, they were typically permitted to gather dead wood, fallen branches, twigs, and other scraps that had already broken from the trees. This meant that the search for fuel was a painstaking, daily ritual. You trudge out into the cold, your breath a cloud in the frosty air, your eyes scanning the ground for any bit of usable material. You feel the cold bite at your ears and nose as you walk through the now barren fields, your wooden bucket in hand. Every dried branch, every piece of gnarled root is a prize. You snap the smaller twigs over your knee, the sharp crack a satisfying sound. The larger pieces of wood require more effort, sometimes a small, dull hatchet that you share with your neighbors. This daily quest for fuel is a meditation on scarcity. You know that if you don't find enough, your family will be cold and your food will not be cooked. The responsibility weighs on you, a heavy, silent burden. There's a certain Zen-like quality to the process, a complete focus on the simple task of finding and gathering. A quirky tidbit is that peasants would sometimes burn a mixture of wood, dried dung, and even peat if they lived in a boggy area. Dried animal dung, especially from cows, was a surprisingly effective and long-lasting fuel source. And it was a readily available resource in many villages. It was a smelly, smoky addition to the fire, but it provided heat, and that's all that mattered. It's a reminder of the relentless pragmatism of medieval life. If it burns, you burn it. Historians still argue whether the widespread use of dung and other alternative fuels contributed to the relatively low levels of deforestation in some regions during the Middle Ages, as it reduced the demand for precious timber. You just know that sometimes your hovel smells vaguely of cow patties, and you try not to think about it too much. As you gather your precious wood, you see your neighbors doing the same. There's a quiet camaraderie in the shared struggle. You nod to old Thomas, who is meticulously breaking apart a dead bush, his face a mask of concentration. You know his wife is ill, and the fire in his hearth is a matter of life and death for her. You leave him a particularly large, solid piece of wood you found, a small gesture that says more than any words ever could. He nods back, a flicker of gratitude in his weary eyes. This is the way of the village. You look out for each other, because there's no one else to do it. You return to your hovel, your bucket full, your hands numb, and your mind at peace. You've done your part for today. You drop the wood near the hearth, the sound a promise of warmth. The fire roars to life as you add another log, and for a moment, the world outside seems to disappear entirely. With the hearth burning brightly, you turn your attention to the final fortifications of your home. It's an act of war, really. With the cold as your relentless enemy, you step outside, the frigid air stinging your nostrils, and you circle your wattle and daub hovel, inspecting it for weaknesses. You've already patched the most glaring gaps. Remember that muddy, straw and dung mixture, but the cold is sneaky, and it finds every tiny crack and crevice. You notice a hairline fracture where the wall meets the roof, a small gap where a wattle branch has shrunken, leaving a thin, cold slit. The work of survival is never truly finished. It's a constant battle against entropy and the elements. Your tools are simple, a small trowel-like piece of wood and a bucket of that, now familiar, pasty mud. You painstakingly apply the mixture to every seam, every corner, and every tiny hole. It's a slow, meticulous process, and your fingers grow stiff with the cold. A mainstream historical fact is that many peasant homes were not built with a permanent, sealed foundation. The walls simply sat on the ground, making them prone to drafts from below. To combat this, you and your neighbors would sometimes pile earth or straw around the base of the hut, creating a temporary barrier against the wind and seeping cold. You've already done this, creating a small, earthy moat around your home, and you give it a final check, adding another layer of packed mud. You then turn your attention to the single, shuttered window, a small opening in the wall that provides a bit of light but is also a major source of heat loss. You check the wooden shutter, making sure it fits as snugly as possible, and you pack straw into the remaining gaps. A quirky tidbit is that some peasants would use a translucent animal membrane, like stretched and dried pig bladder, to cover their window openings. While it didn't provide perfect clarity like glass, it did let in a bit of light while keeping the wind out. A clever, if slightly gross, innovation. Historians still argue whether this was a common practice or more of a rare, regional one, but you can imagine the smell. This makes you appreciate your simple wooden shutter, a solid, if opaque, solution to the problem of a hole in your wall. As you work, the wind picks up, a low moan that whistles through the village. You feel the urgency grow. Every bit of effort you put into sealing your home now will pay dividends in the long, dark nights ahead. You finish your work, stepping back to admire your handiwork. The newly patched walls a testament to your hard-won skills. You return inside, and the difference is palpable. The room feels slightly warmer, the air still, the only sound the gentle crackle of the fire. You pull your well-worn tunic around you, a small shiver running down your spine, and you realize that your home is not just a place to live, it's a living entity, a shield that you must constantly maintain and reinforce. Your family is huddled around the fire, a small, fragile knot of humanity against the vast, cold emptiness of the world outside. The battle against the winter is a slow, methodical war of attrition, and you've just won a small skirmish, but you know that the true test is still to come. With your home fortified against the drafts, you now turn to your second line of defense, your clothes. You are not a lord with fine furs or silks, you are a peasant, and your wardrobe is built for function, not fashion. You sit by the fire, your wife mending a tear in your tunic with a bone needle and a length of coarse thread. The firelight glints off the needle, and you appreciate the meticulous care she takes. A single hole can be a deadly invitation for the cold, and every stitch is a small act of defiance against the elements. A mainstream historical fact is that wool was the most common and vital material for medieval peasant clothing. It's an excellent insulator, even when it's damp, and it's durable enough to withstand the brutal physical labor of peasant life. Your tunic and trousers, though patched countless times, are made of this rough, scratchy wool. It's not comfortable, but it's effective. You run a hand over the rough spun fabric of your tunic, remembering the sheep you sheared in the spring and the long, tedious hours your wife and daughters spent carding and spinning the wool into thread. This isn't something you bought, it's something you made. A direct product of your labor and the land. Your tunic is a second skin, a constant companion through every season. It bears the stains of the harvest and the repairs of 1,000 daily toils. It's a testament to your life. You also wear a simple woolen cap, which your wife made for you, because you know a significant amount of body heat is lost through the head. It's a small detail, but a crucial one. A quirky tidbit is that peasants sometimes used lanolin, the natural grease found in unwashed wool, as a kind of primitive waterproofing. By not fully scouring the wool, they would retain some of its natural oils, which would help to repel rain and snow, keeping the underlying layers drier. It made the clothes smell a bit like a sheep, but you're not exactly going to a fancy ball, so that's a trade-off you're willing to make. The lanolin also had the added bonus of making the fabric a bit softer over time, a rare luxury for your skin. Historians still argue whether the exact method and extent of wool processing varied greatly by region and time period. But the fundamental principle of using wool's natural properties for insulation and waterproofing remained constant. You don't need a historian to tell you that, you just need to feel the biting cold on a winter morning. You watch your wife finish mending the tear, and she hands the tunic to you. You slip it on. The rough wool a familiar weight on your shoulders. You also have a simple, sleeveless tunic that you wear over the first one, adding another layer of crucial insulation. You think of how much you rely on these simple garments for your survival. They are more than just clothes. They are a mobile hovel, a personal shield against the relentless cold. As you sit by the fire, you know that your clothes, your home, and your hearth are all part of a single, interconnected system of survival. Every element depends on the other, and you, as the keeper of this fragile system, must ensure that no single part fails. The winter is a great equalizer, and it reminds you that the difference between life and death can be as simple as a single stitch in a woolen tunic. With your outer garments secure, you now turn to the critical layers closest to your skin. The cold, you know, is a thief, and its most effective weapon is moisture. If your inner layers get damp from sweat and then the air turns frigid, you can freeze from the inside out. Your first line of defense is a simple linen undershirt. This is a mainstream historical fact. Linen was the most common fabric for undergarments because it's breathable and wicks moisture away from the skin, preventing that deadly clamminess. You feel the soft, familiar fabric against your skin, a rare moment of comfort in a world of rough wool. This undershirt is patched and repatched, and you're careful to keep it as clean as possible, a difficult feat in a world without soap as we know it and with limited water. You also wear simple linen shorts, and your legs are wrapped in long strips of cloth called brays, which are tied at the knee. These layers aren't just for modesty, they are essential for trapping warmth and preventing chafing. The chafing part might sound like a joke, but trust me, when you're toiling in the fields for 12 hours a day, it becomes a very serious concern. Your wife then helps you with the next layer, long woolen leggings that are worn over the linen. They are tied with leather thongs to keep them from slipping down. A simple but effective design. It's a bit like putting on a very unstylish and itchy second skin, but you know that every layer counts. This is about building a personal fortress against the cold, and each piece of clothing is a brick in the wall. A quirky tidbit is that medieval people often wore their clothes for weeks on end without washing them. Not only was water scarce and heating it a monumental task, but the dirt and oils that built up in the fabric actually helped to insulate it better. It's a bit gross to think about, but the grime provided an extra layer of protection, a kind of primitive, natural barrier against the cold. You might smell a bit ripe, but you're warm, and that's the only metric that matters. Historians still argue about the precise frequency of washing for different social classes, but for a peasant, cleanliness was a luxury, not a necessity. Survival was the ultimate goal, and smelling a little earthy was a small price to pay for that. Your wife carefully wraps your feet in rags before you pull on your simple leather shoes, called turn shoes, that are made from a single piece of leather sewn together. The rags provide an extra layer of insulation, and you know that cold feet can lead to more serious problems. You stand up, feeling the weight and bulk of all your layers. You are a walking testament to the principles of heat conservation. Every piece of clothing, every strip of cloth, has a purpose. You are a living, breathing onion of survival, and you can only hope that you have enough layers to get you through the winter. As you look at your family, each one of them a similarly bundled figure, you realize that your entire village is engaged in this same process, this same daily ritual of protection. The cold is a shared enemy, and your clothing is a shared solution. With your home and body prepared, your focus shifts to the wider community. As the days grow shorter and the air bites harder, the village itself becomes a kind of collective hovel, a single entity fighting for survival. You see the communal spirit in action every day. A mainstream historical fact is that medieval villages often operated on a system of shared labor and resources, particularly during the critical periods of harvest and winter. This wasn't a utopian ideal, it was a pragmatic necessity. You, for instance, helped your neighbor Thomas carry his firewood, and in return, he will lend you his sturdy axe for a few days to split the larger logs you've gathered. The unwritten social contract of the village is the glue that holds everyone together. You watch as the women of the village gather together in a single, larger home, perhaps that of the reeve, the village elder, to spin wool and mend clothes. They share the limited warmth of a single fire, making the work more efficient and the burden of firewood less on any one family. The rhythmic hum of their spinning wheels and the quiet chatter are a reassuring soundtrack to the approaching winter. The men, likewise, might gather to repair tools or work on a community project, like reinforcing the fence that protects the village from wolves. This isn't just about work, it's about being together, about sharing the weight of the coming season. This communal gathering is also a crucial opportunity to share news, gossip, and stories, and to ensure that no one is left behind. A quirky tidbit is that medieval peasants often celebrated a feast known as Lent's End before the long period of fasting leading up to Easter. This feast, which took place well into the winter, was a way to use up the last of the perishable foods and to celebrate the shared survival of the community. It was a communal feast, a moment of joy and solidarity in the face of scarcity, and it was a way of reinforcing the bonds that would be so crucial for the last difficult stretch of winter. Historians still argue whether these communal feasts were a holdover from pagan rituals or if they were an organic response to the pressures of communal living. You don't care about the historical debate, you just know that a shared meal is a powerful thing, a moment of joy in a time of great hardship. As you walk through the village, you feel the collective energy of the community. You see a group of children playing a simple game with carved sticks, their laughter a bright sound in the cold air. You see old women huddled together, their faces a map of 1,000 winters. You see the blacksmith's forge glowing like a beacon, a centre of heat and industry. The winter is a great test, and it's a test that you can't pass alone. Your survival is inextricably linked to the survival of your neighbours. This sense of shared fate, of a communal struggle, is a powerful force that sustains you. It's the knowledge that when you are at your weakest, your neighbour will be there to help you, and you will be there for them. The harvest is done, the stores are stocked, and the bitter cold is settling in, before the long, lean months truly begin. There is one last hurrah. You are heading toward the village green, a central patch of trampled earth where a large fire is already crackling. Tonight is the feast before famine, a final, communal celebration of the harvest's bounty. You feel a rare lightness in your step, a small reprieve from the constant worry. This feast is not a formal, sit-down affair. It's a chaotic, joyous coming together of the entire village. It's a psychological turning point, a moment to exhale before you hold your breath for the next 5 months. A mainstream historical fact is that these harvest festivals, often tied to a specific saint's day or a pagan ritual, were common across medieval Europe. They were a crucial part of the social calendar, a time for feasting, drinking, and a moment of collective happiness. You carry a small, wooden bowl of boiled turnips and a single, precious piece of salted pork. Your neighbour brings a loaf of coarse barley bread, still warm from his wife's oven. The smell of roasting meat, perhaps a goat or a few chickens that couldn't be sustained through the winter, hangs in the air, a scent so rich and rare it feels almost decadent. You find a spot near the fire and sit down with your family, the warmth a welcome relief from the biting evening air. The sound of rough-hewn flutes and a drum fills the air, and a few of the younger villagers start to dance, their feet stomping a rhythm into the frozen ground. It's a moment of pure, unadulterated joy, a memory to cling to in the dark months ahead. A quirky tidbit is that mead, a fermented beverage made from honey, was often a part of these feasts. It was a luxury, but the village might have a communal vat that was tapped for these special occasions. You take a sip from a shared bowl, the sweet, alcoholic liquid a warm fire in your belly, and you feel the weight of the world lift just a little bit. Historians still argue whether the consumption of alcohol, particularly in these communal settings, was a controlled ritual or a simple opportunity for a bit of drunken merriment. You just know that a few sips make the cold feel a little less cold, and the worries a little less worrisome. You laugh at a joke a neighbour tells, a crude but funny story about the local lord's priapic horse, and for a moment, you are not a peasant worried about starvation. You are just a man, enjoying a rare, good meal with his community. As the moon rises, you watch the fire burn down. The flames are mirror to the fading joy of the evening. The feast is ending, and the mood is starting to change. The dancing slows, the stories become more subdued, and the laughter fades into a quiet hum of conversation. You finish your bowl of turnips and eat the last piece of pork, savouring the flavour. The memory of this meal, of this night, will be a powerful tool against the hunger and monotony of the coming winter. It's a reminder of what you're fighting for, not just survival, but a chance at moments like this. As you walk back to your hovel, The cold wind cuts through your woolen tunic. A sharp reality check that the good times are over. The true test of the winter has begun. You hold your wife's hand. The warmth of her touch, a final comfort against the brutal, encroaching night. The feast is a distant, warm memory now. The true winter has arrived. You wake up one morning, not to the familiar chill, but to a silence so profound it's unsettling. You push open the hovel's wooden shutter, and the world outside is a stark, white landscape. Snow, it's a shocking sight. A blanket of white that muffles all sound, making the village seem like a ghost town. The world you knew, the muddy paths and the barren fields, is gone, replaced by a pristine, unforgiving wilderness. The cold is a physical presence, a biting weight on your skin. A mainstream historical fact is that the average winter temperatures in medieval Europe were significantly colder than they are today, part of a period known as the Little Ice Age. This meant that rivers froze solid, and snow could lie on the ground for months on end. You watch as the snow continues to fall, a steady, silent procession of white flakes. It's beautiful, yes, but you know its true nature. It's a barrier, a trap, and a heavy blanket that will make every task, even a simple trip to the outhouse, a monumental struggle. Your breath hangs in the air like a cloud, and you feel the cold seep into your bones. The reality of the long winter truly sets in. The harvest is a memory, the feast is a memory, and now, all that is left is the present, the cold, the fire, and the four walls of your home. The world has contracted, and your existence has become smaller, more focused, more desperate. A quirky tidbit is that in some villages, a tradition called scrimshanking was observed during the first heavy snowfall. It was a kind of communal game where the villagers would compete to see who could build the most intricate or amusing snow figures. While it may seem frivolous, it was a crucial way to maintain morale and to find a bit of joy in the face of the encroaching gloom. Historians still argue whether these kinds of folk customs were a widespread phenomenon or a localized way of coping with the long, dark winter months. You just know that you see a few children building a crude snowman near their hovel, and their laughter is a welcome sound in the oppressive silence. You go outside to check on your small pig, who is huddled in a lean-to you built for him. You shovel a small path to his enclosure, the work a shocking strain on your muscles. The snow is already deep, and you know that you will have to do this every day. You give him a small handful of acorns and a bit of stored slop, and you feel a pang of worry. Will you have enough food for him to survive the winter? He is a crucial investment, a source of food and fat for next year. You can't afford to lose him. You retreat back into your hovel, sealing the door against the relentless cold. The sound of the wind whistling through the cracks, a mournful soundtrack to the winter. You sit by the fire, watching the flames, the only source of warmth and light in a world that has gone silent and white, with the snow piled high outside. Your daily life has shifted entirely indoors. The rhythm of your existence, once dictated by the rising and setting of the sun and the demands of the fields, is now governed by the hearth. Your world has become a small, smoky circle of warmth, and the day-to-day work has become a series of small, repetitive tasks. You wake in the cold darkness of the pre-dawn, and the first order of business is to tend to the fire. You carefully coax the embers back to life, adding a small piece of wood. The sound a gentle hiss and crackle. This is a crucial moment. If the fire dies, the cold will win, and the effort to restart it from scratch will be a monumental and painful task. A mainstream historical fact is that many medieval households would bank their fire at night, covering the glowing embers with ash to keep them alive until morning. A practice so important it's where the word curfew, from the old French couvre-feu, meaning to cover the fire, comes from. Your wife and children are still sleeping, huddled together for warmth on a bed of straw covered with a few woolen blankets. You work quietly. Your movements a practiced ballet of survival. Your day is now a series of small, focused chores, mending a tear in a piece of clothing, sharpening a tool with a whetstone, checking on the food stores to make sure they haven't spoiled, and, most importantly, keeping the fire going. You can't just toss a huge log on the fire, every piece of wood is precious, and you must manage your fuel with the precision of a jeweler. You add small, carefully selected pieces of wood, making sure the fire is just hot enough to keep the room warm and to cook the day's single meal, but not so hot that you waste fuel. A quirky tidbit is that peasants would sometimes have a special piece of wood, often a large log, that was kept on the fire for weeks or even months. This was called the Yule log, and it was often brought in with great ceremony at the start of winter. This log was a symbol of hope and continuity, a physical representation of the fire that would sustain the family through the long winter nights. Historians still argue whether the Yule log was a widespread practice or more of a regional custom, but the symbolism of a long-burning fire is a powerful one that transcends culture and time. You look at a large log you have set aside, a piece of oak you gathered in the fall, and you know that it will be a source of comfort and warmth for weeks to come. As the day goes on, the light from the small, shuttered window is weak and watery, a pale imitation of the sun. You and your family sit by the fire. Your activities a quiet hum of existence. The children play with a few carved wooden toys, their faces illuminated by the flickering firelight. Your wife spins wool with her drop spindle, the rhythmic motion a calming sound. You take out a large, heavy whetstone and begin to sharpen your small hatchet, the metallic scrape a focused, meditative sound. The winter is a time for maintenance, for a kind of hibernation, a period of quiet waiting. You know that you are not just waiting for the spring, you are waiting for the earth to warm, for the sun to return, and for the world to come alive again. The cozy, albeit smoky, reality of your indoor life comes with a brutal trade-off, making do with less. The feast is a distant memory, and the generous portions of autumn are gone. Your diet has become a monotonous, careful calculation. A mainstream historical fact is that the peasant diet in winter was primarily based on what could be stored. This meant a steady and uninspiring rotation of salted meat, pickled vegetables, and a lot of grain, usually in the form of porridge or a hard, coarse bread. You now eat a single, cooked meal a day, sometimes two, depending on how well your family's stores are holding up. The flavor is bland, the texture rough, and the feeling of fullness is fleeting. You feel a constant, low-level gnawing in your stomach, a quiet emptiness that you learn to ignore. You and your wife carefully portion out the food, a small piece of salted pork, a few spoonfuls of porridge, a handful of dried beans. This is your family's lifeblood, and every single morsel is a precious commodity. You see your children's eyes linger on the food, and you feel a pang of guilt that you can't give them more, but you know that to give them more today means they will have less tomorrow, and that could mean the difference between survival and starvation. It's a difficult, daily moral calculus that you must perform without a single moment of weakness. The winter is a test of your willpower as much as it is a test of your physical endurance. A quirky tidbit is that peasants would sometimes add a little bit of ale to their porridge, not for flavor, but for nutrition. The fermentation process in the ale added a small amount of vitamins and minerals to the bland grain, making it a crucial dietary supplement. So, your breakfast porridge might have had a little buzz to it, a small consolation in a world of bland food and endless cold. Historians still argue whether this practice was widespread or a rare treat, but the underlying principle of using every resource, even a fermented one, is a testament to the ingenuity of a people living on the brink. You take a bite of the thick, gritty bread, and you can feel the barley husks in it. It's hard to chew, and it sits heavy in your stomach, but you know that every calorie is a step closer to spring. As the days turn into weeks, you feel the effects of the reduced diet. Your movements are slower, your energy levels lower. You are a less vibrant version of your former self, a body on a low-fuel setting, conserving every bit of energy for the most essential tasks. The children seem to have less energy for their games, their laughter less frequent. You are all, in a way, in a state of semi-hibernation, a collective slowing down that is a natural response to the lack of food and warmth. You sit by the fire, your stomach rumbling a quiet complaint, and you remember the feast, the joyous night of full stomachs and laughter. You hold on to that memory, a small, flickering light of hope in the darkness, and you pray that you have enough to last until the first shoots of green appear in the fields. The winter is a long, slow marathon of endurance. And you know you are only at the beginning. The low fuel mode you've entered is a quiet, profound transformation. It's a kind of winter slumber, a slowdown of the body and mind that mirrors the world outside. The pace of life has become glacial. You sleep longer, your body demanding rest as it struggles to conserve every precious calorie. You find yourself sitting by the fire for long periods, your gaze lost in the hypnotic dance of the flames, your mind a quiet place of waiting and patience. This is not a choice. It is a necessity, a biological response to the conditions of your life. The medieval peasant, it turns out, was a master of energy conservation. A mainstream historical fact is that the concept of a winter period of reduced activity was not just a peasant reality, but was also part of the natural rhythm of the year for everyone, including the nobility. With limited light and warmth, daily life simply slowed down. Work, even for the most powerful, was often limited to indoor tasks, and social gatherings were few and far between. For you, the peasant, this hibernation is a matter of survival. You move only when you absolutely have to, your steps careful and measured, your voice a quiet hum. The children's play is less boisterous, their games more sedentary, their energy conserved for the simple acts of eating and staying warm. Your wife's spinning wheel turns at a steady, rhythmic pace, a quiet protest against the frantic energy of the autumn harvest. A quirky tidbit is that some historians believe that the long, dark nights and the extended periods of indoor confinement contributed to a kind of communal storytelling and a rich oral tradition. With no books and no artificial light, people would gather around the fire, their imaginations fueled by the flickering flames. Stories of ancient heroes, mythical creatures, and the histories of their families were passed down from one generation to the next. The winter was a time for the mind to work, even as the body rested. Historians still argue whether this was a primary function of the winter months or a simple byproduct of having nothing else to do. You just know that your father's stories of the great flood that almost wiped out your village are a powerful part of your family's history, and you find yourself telling them to your children, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. As the sun sets, casting a faint, purple-grey light through your shuttered window, you feel the familiar pull of sleep. The days blend into each other, a long, quiet procession of cold and firelight. Your body is a vessel, a fragile ship sailing through a long, dark night, and you can only hope that it has the strength to reach the dawn. The winter slumber is not a time of rest and relaxation. It is a time of quiet endurance, of a deep and profound waiting. And as you lay on your straw bed, huddled with your family, you feel the cold seeping through the walls, a constant, low-level threat that you have learned to live with. You close your eyes, and you dream of the warmth of the spring sun on your skin, a memory that you hold onto like a precious jewel. The winter slumber is not without its perils. While your body and mind slow down, your vulnerability to sickness increases dramatically. The cold is not just an inconvenience, it's a constant threat that weakens the body's defenses. You feel a prickle of fear whenever you hear a cough from one of your children or a wheeze from your wife, a simple fever, a cough that lingers for too long, a stomach ailment. Any of these could quickly become a death sentence. There are no doctors, no fancy medicines, no quick fixes. A mainstream historical fact is that disease was a constant and devastating threat in the medieval world, and winter was a particularly dangerous time, with people huddled together in small, poorly ventilated homes. Illnesses spread with terrifying speed. You watch your youngest child, a little girl of 3, and you see her shiver. A small tremor that has nothing to do with the cold. Her forehead feels hot to your touch, and you feel a wave of dread wash over you. The small, communal hovel has become a petri dish, and the fear of contagion is a palpable presence. You remember the last winter, when old Margaret, the village midwife, succumbed to a fever that had swept through the community. You remember the helplessness, the quiet despair as her family watched her fade away. You know that you are not immune, that your family is not immune. The fragility of life in this time is a stark reality, a constant reminder that you are at the mercy of forces far beyond your control. A quirky tidbit is that medieval peasants had a number of folk beliefs about illness. They might believe that a fever was caused by an evil spirit or a curse, and they would use a variety of charms and rituals to try to ward it off. They might hang a sprig of a certain herb over the door or tie a red ribbon around the wrist of the sick person. While these rituals may seem superstitious to us, they were a way of exercising a small amount of control in a world where they had none. Historians still argue whether these folk beliefs had any real therapeutic effect, or if they were purely psychological, a way of giving hope to the hopeless. You just know that your wife is carefully brewing a concoction of boiled water and dried herbs, chamomile and elderflower, that she believes will help to bring down the fever. And you pray that she is right. As you sit by the fire, you can hear the soft, ragged breathing of your child. The sound is a dagger in your heart. You feel the weight of your powerlessness, the terrible knowledge that you have done everything you can, and now you must simply wait and hope. The winter is a time of endurance, but it is also a time of profound vulnerability. The cold is an enemy, but the sickness that it brings is an even more insidious one. You watch the fire burn down. The flames a constant reminder of the life that you are so desperately trying to protect. The fever has taken hold of your child, a cruel dance between hot and cold that makes her small body tremble. In this world, you are your own apothecary, and your knowledge of medicine is a fragile collection of folk remedies and passed-down wisdom. You've brewed the herbal tea, but you now turn to other methods, desperate to find some relief. A mainstream historical fact is that medieval herbal medicine was often the only recourse for the sick. Villages would have a designated person, often a wise woman or a cunning man, who had a deeper knowledge of the healing properties of plants. They would use herbs like willow bark, a natural source of salicylic acid, the active ingredient in modern aspirin, chamomile, and peppermint to treat various ailments. But even this knowledge was limited, and often the treatments were more palliative than curative. Your wife is a repository of this kind of knowledge. She gently applies a poultice of mashed plantain leaves and honey to your child's chest, believing that it will help with the congestion. The poultice is warm and smells faintly of crushed leaves and sweetness, and you watch her work with a silent awe. She is a healer, a protector, and a fierce advocate for your child's life. You, in your own way, contribute by keeping the fire at a steady, warm heat, a task that seems both utterly simple and profoundly important. The warmth is a kind of medicine in itself, a way of keeping the cold at bay and giving your child's body a fighting chance. A quirky tidbit is that some folk remedies were based on the idea of sympathetic magic, where a cure was sought from a source that resembled the illness. For instance, a person with jaundice, which turns the skin yellow, might be told to look at a yellow object or eat a food that was yellow, in the belief that the illness would be drawn out of them. While this may sound absurd to us, it was a common and deeply held belief, and it was a way of making sense of a chaotic and terrifying world. Historians still argue whether these seemingly irrational practices were more about psychological comfort or if they contained a hidden kernel of truth that we've lost over time. You don't have time for academic debates. You just watch as your wife tries to get a few spoonfuls of a thin broth made from dried herbs and a small piece of salted meat into your child, her face a mask of worry. As the day turns into night, you sit by your child's bedside, your hand on her forehead, feeling the heat. You can do nothing but watch, wait, and pray. The fire flickers, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls of your hovel, and you feel the immense weight of your powerlessness. You have done everything you can, and now you must trust in the strength of your child's body and the fragile, unpredictable power of your folk remedies. The winter is a time of endurance, but it is also a time of profound vulnerability. The cold is an enemy, but the sickness that it brings is an even more insidious one. You watch the fire burn down, the flames a constant reminder of the life that you are so desperately trying to protect. The fever has broken, a small but profound victory, and your child is sleeping peacefully, her breath now even and quiet. The immediate crisis has passed, but the long, dark nights of winter are a different kind of enemy. You sit by the fire, your family now sleeping, and you feel the weight of the endless darkness. The sun is a fleeting visitor, a brief period of weak, watery light that does little to brighten your world. Most of your life is now lived in the flickering, smoky light of the hearth. This prolonged darkness has a psychological toll, a feeling of being disconnected from the world and from the natural rhythms of life. A mainstream historical fact is that winter, particularly in northern latitudes, was a time of immense psychological strain due to the lack of light. It was a time of fear, superstition, and introspection. You watch the flames dance, and your mind begins to wander. In the quiet darkness, your thoughts can become your own worst enemies. You think about the meager food stores, the possibility of a sickness returning, the endless cold. The darkness seems to amplify every fear and every worry. The world outside your hovel feels vast, empty, and full of unseen dangers, the howl of a wolf in the distance, the whisper of the wind through the trees. You are a small, so fragile point of light in a sea of blackness, and the feeling is both humbling and terrifying. You are grateful for the fire, for the light it provides, but you also know that it is a temporary defense against an eternal night. A quirky tidbit is that peasants would sometimes light a small, simple oil lamp made from a hollowed-out turnip or other vegetable. The lamp would be filled with rendered animal fat, tallow, and a simple wick. While it didn't provide much light, it was a way of extending the day just a little bit, a small act of defiance against the endless night. These lamps were often called rushlights because the wick was made from the pith of a rush plant. Historians still argue whether the use of such simple lamps was a widespread practice or a sign of extreme poverty. You, however, are grateful for a simple tallow lamp that your wife fashioned, a small, flickering beacon that helps you mend a piece of clothing or work on a small task after the fire has been banked for the night. The darkness is also a time for stories, for the passing down of traditions, and for a quiet connection with your family. As you sit by the fire, you hear the soft breathing of your wife and children, and you feel a profound sense of love and protection. The darkness may be vast, but your small circle of light is a powerful, impenetrable fortress. You look into the flames, and you see not just fire, but a history of your family, your village, and your way of life. The fire has been a constant companion through every winter, a silent witness to 1,000 struggles and 1,000 victories, and as the flames flicker and dance, you feel a quiet sense of peace. You are not alone in the darkness. You are part of a long, unbroken chain of people who have survived the long, dark nights of winter, and you will, too. The long, dark nights, though fraught with psychological strain, were not a period of pure, silent suffering. They were also the crucible for a rich culture of storytelling and entertainment. With no books, no plays, and no screens, the human voice was the primary source of amusement and education. You sit by the fire, a small smoky cocoon of light and warmth, and you tell your children the story of your grandfather, a legendary figure who once fought off a rabid wolf with nothing but a wooden stick. Your voice is a low hum, a soothing drone that hypnotizes your children, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and admiration. This is not just a story, it's a history lesson, a moral compass, and a testament to the strength and resilience of your family. A mainstream historical fact is that oral storytelling was the primary method of passing down knowledge, history, and culture in the Middle Ages, particularly among the illiterate peasant class. These stories were often a blend of fact and fiction, of local history and ancient myths. They served a dual purpose, to entertain and to educate, to remind the community of their shared past and to prepare them for the future. The stories were often cautionary tales, fables with a clear moral message, and epic adventures of heroes and villains. They were a way of making sense of a chaotic and often terrifying world, of finding meaning in the brutality of your daily life. Your children also have their own forms of entertainment. They have a few carved wooden toys, a simple spinning top, and a few small, smooth stones that they use for a game of skill. They play by the firelight, their laughter a bright, hopeful sound in the quiet hovel. A quirky tidbit is that riddles were a very popular form of entertainment, not just for children but for adults as well. They were a way of exercising the mind and a form of social bonding. A simple riddle, like, I have a mouth but never speak, a body but never move. What am I? A river, could provide hours of entertainment and friendly competition. Historians still argue whether the popularity of riddles was due to a lack of other entertainment or if it was a sign of a deeper, more intellectual culture than we often give peasants credit for. You just know that your father's riddles were always a bit too difficult for you, and you find yourself repeating them to your own children. A small piece of your heritage that you pass on. As the night deepens, the fire burns lower, and the stories come to an end. You watch as your children, their imaginations now filled with heroes and monsters, drift off to sleep. The rhythm of the night is a slow, steady pulse of firelight and breathing, and you feel a profound sense of peace. The darkness may be vast, and the cold may be brutal, but within the four walls of your home, with the warmth of your family and the comfort of your shared stories, you feel safe. You know that you are not just surviving, you are living, and you are passing on a legacy of strength and resilience that will last for generations to come. The long, dark nights and the constant worry of winter are not endured alone. The church, a simple stone or wooden structure at the center of your village, is a powerful force in your life, providing not only spiritual comfort, but also a vital social and community hub. You and your family bundle up in your thickest woolens and make the short, cold journey to the church. The air inside is still frigid, but it feels warmer than the wind outside, and the sight of your neighbours gathered together is a powerful comfort. A mainstream historical fact is that the church was the absolute centre of peasant life. It was a place for worship, for baptisms and funerals, and for the simple and profound act of coming together as a community. The light inside the church is dim, filtering through a few small, unglazed windows. A few candles flicker at the altar, and the priest, a familiar figure in a simple robe, begins the service. His voice is a low, soothing hum, a familiar sound that has been the soundtrack to your life. The Latin prayers are largely incomprehensible to you, but the meaning is not. You know that you are in a sacred space, a place where you can find a moment of peace and a sense of hope in the face of the endless cold. The church is a place where the fear of starvation and sickness can be momentarily set aside, replaced by the quiet certainty of faith. A quirky tidbit is that medieval churches were often unheated, but the act of a large group of people huddling together inside actually raised the temperature of the building by several degrees. So, the act of worship was also, in a very practical sense, an act of warming up. Historians still argue whether the church's power was rooted in genuine spiritual belief, or if it was simply a pragmatic necessity, a kind of social and physical warmth in a world of cold and isolation. You just know that you are grateful for the warmth of your neighbours' bodies and the shared sense of community. You see old Thomas, his face lined with worry, standing next to you, and you give him a small, knowing nod. You are not alone after the service. You don't immediately return to your hovel. Instead, you and your neighbours linger, a cluster of bundled figures chatting quietly. The churchyard, now a pristine blanket of snow, is a gathering place. The children play a simple game, their laughter a bright, fleeting sound. You exchange a few words with your neighbour, discussing the quality of the firewood, the health of your families, and the latest news from the village. The church, a sacred space for prayer, has now become a secular space for community, a place where the bonds of a village are strengthened and renewed. As you walk back to your hovel, the cold wind biting at your cheeks, you feel a profound sense of peace. You know that you are not just a single, isolated family fighting against the cold. You are a part of a larger community, a web of interconnected lives that will get through this winter together. Even in the deepest part of winter, the world outside your village doesn't entirely cease to exist. There are still goods to be had and needs that cannot be met by your own labour. You hear a shout from the village green, a sound that breaks the silence of the winter morning. It's the arrival of the winter market. A few hardy traders, their faces red from the cold, have braved the frozen roads to bring their wares to your village. You bundle up and head out, a small leather pouch clutched tightly in your hand. The market is not a grand affair like the ones in the summer. It's a small, makeshift collection of a few stalls, their goods covered in a light layer of snow. A mainstream historical fact is that even in the Middle Ages, long-distance trade continued throughout the winter, albeit on a much smaller scale. Traders would use frozen rivers as roads and would often travel in groups for safety from both the cold and from bandits. These winter markets were a crucial lifeline for villages, a way to acquire goods that were simply unavailable locally. You see a trader selling a few pieces of metalwork, some nails and a simple knife, and another selling a small sack of salt. a precious and vital commodity for preserving food. You also see a woman selling a few small, dried fish, a welcome change from the steady diet of salted pork and porridge. You carefully count the few coins in your pouch. You have a few pennies you've saved from selling a bit of your grain in the autumn. You know that these coins are a rare and precious resource, and you must spend them wisely. You buy a small sack of salt, the weight of the bag a reassuring presence in your hands. You also buy a single, small knife, a replacement for your own dull, cracked one. It's a luxury, but you know that a good knife is a crucial tool for both survival and for your work. A quirky tidbit is that medieval coins were often made of silver, and they were a tangible form of wealth that could be melted down and repurposed for other uses. Some peasants would even file down the edges of the coins to make a small, makeshift blade. Historians still argue whether this was a common practice or more of a myth, but the idea of turning your money into a tool is a powerful one. As you walk back to your hovel, the cold wind biting at your cheeks, you feel a sense of satisfaction. The salt will help to preserve your remaining meat, and the knife will be a valuable tool for your work. You are a small, isolated village, but you are not entirely disconnected from the world. You are part of a larger network of trade and commerce, a fragile web of connections that allows you to survive the winter. You enter your hovel, the warmth a welcome relief, and you show your wife the new knife. She smiles, a rare expression of happiness, and you know that you have made a good purchase. The winter is a time of waiting, but it is also a time of small, profound victories. And this is one of them. The winter markets are fleeting, but the work of the blacksmith is a constant, steady presence in the life of the village. The forge, a simple building of stone and wood, is a beacon of light and warmth in the heart of the village. You trudge through the snow, a broken hoe handle in your hand, toward the rhythmic clang of the blacksmith's hammer. The sound is a reassuring pulse, a sign of industry and life in the quiet, frozen landscape. As you approach the forge, you feel the heat radiating from the open doorway, a welcome relief from the biting cold. The blacksmith, a large, powerful man with a soot-stained face and muscular arms, is a crucial figure in the village. He is the keeper of metal, the master of fire, and the creator of tools that make your life possible. He mends your broken tools, sharpens your knives, and forges the ironwork that holds your hovel together. He is a kind of wizard, a man who can turn a lump of dull, cold metal into a sharp, useful object. A mainstream historical fact is that the village blacksmith was one of the most respected and well-compensated people in the community, not just for his skills, but for his importance to the village's survival. Without his tools, your work would be impossible. You hand him the broken hoe handle, a crucial tool for the spring planting, and he examines it with a critical eye. He nods, and you feel a wave of relief. He takes the old, broken metal piece, heats it in his forge until it glows a brilliant orange, and then begins to hammer it back into shape. The sound of the hammer on the anvil is a deep, resonant clang, a kind of music that speaks of strength and resilience. The sparks fly in the dim light of the forge, a beautiful, ephemeral dance of light and heat. A quirky tidbit is that medieval blacksmiths would often use a piece of metal from a broken tool to forge a new one. This was a form of recycling born of necessity, a way of using every single bit of precious metal. So your old, broken hoe will live on in the form of a new tool. Historians still argue about the extent of metal recycling in the Middle Ages and whether it was a widespread practice or a sign of extreme poverty. But you know that every bit of metal is a precious commodity that cannot be wasted. As you wait, you watch the blacksmith work. His movements a powerful, graceful ballet of fire and steel. He is a master of his craft, and you feel a profound sense of awe. You think about the difference he makes in your life, the way his work allows you to till the soil, to harvest your crops, and to survive the winter. The forge is not just a place of industry, it is a symbol of hope, a place where broken things are made new again, where cold metal is transformed by the power of fire. You walk back to your hovel, the cold wind biting at your cheeks, but you feel a sense of warmth in your heart. You know that you are not alone in your struggle, that you are part of a larger community of people, each with their own crucial role to play. The blacksmith's forge is a powerful reminder of that. With the village blacksmith now repairing your broken tools, your focus returns to the endless, internal tasks of winter. This is a time for mending, a period of quiet, methodical repair that is as vital to your survival as the harvest itself. You sit by the fire, your wife next to you, and you take out your worn-out leather shoes. The leather is cracked, and a small hole has appeared where your big toe has been rubbing against it. This is not a fashion problem, it is a critical vulnerability. A hole in your shoe is an invitation for frostbite, a gateway for the cold to invade your body. Your wife hands you a small, bone needle and a length of coarse linen thread. You carefully thread the needle and begin the slow, painstaking process of mending the shoe. It's a skill you learned from your father, a lesson in patience and precision. You use a small, leather patch from an old, discarded shoe, and you begin to stitch it into place, your fingers stiff with the cold and the endless work. A mainstream historical fact is that medieval peasants were masters of recycling and repair. They couldn't simply go out and buy a new pair of shoes or a new tunic. Every single piece of clothing, every tool, every piece of furniture was a precious resource that had to be maintained and repaired until it was no longer possible. You feel a profound sense of connection to the objects you are mending. This shoe, this tunic, this hoe handle, they are not just tools, they are a part of your life, a record of your struggles and your triumphs. You think about the hundreds of miles you have walked in these shoes, the countless hours you have spent in the fields, and the way they have protected you from the sharp rocks and the thorny ground. You are not just mending a shoe, you are mending a piece of your life. A quirky tidbit is that peasants would sometimes stuff their shoes with straw or moss to provide extra insulation and a bit of cushioning, a kind of primitive sock that was replaced as it wore out. Historians still argue whether this was a common practice or a sign of extreme poverty, but you just know that a bit of dry straw is a welcome comfort on a cold winter morning. As you work, you watch your wife mending a tear in your son's tunic. Her movements a mirror of your own. The two of you are a team, a quiet, focused engine of survival. You hear the rhythmic hum of her spinning wheel, a constant, soothing soundtrack to your work. The fire crackles, and the shadows dance on the walls, and you feel a sense of peace. The winter is a time of waiting, but it is also a time of quiet, methodical work. A time for a deep and profound connection to the objects that make your life possible. The act of mending is not just a chore, it is an act of hope. A small but powerful gesture that says you believe that you will survive this winter, and that you will need these tools and clothes for the spring that is to come. The snow, which began as a pristine, beautiful blanket, has now become a double-edged sword. You step outside to check on the firewood, and the snow is piled high, a soft, silent wall that makes every movement a struggle. But you also notice the way the snow clings to the roof of your hovel and the walls. A thick, white layer that you know is a powerful insulator. A mainstream historical fact is that snow, while making travel and work nearly impossible, also acted as a natural form of insulation for many medieval homes. The thick layers trapped air, preventing the cold from seeping into the walls and helping to keep the interior of the home warmer. The winter is a time of paradox, where the very thing that makes your life difficult is also a crucial part of your survival. You shovel a path to the outhouse and to the woodpile, the work a strenuous, back-breaking effort that leaves you breathing heavily, your breath a cloud in the cold air. The snow is heavy and wet, and every scoop of the wooden shovel is a small battle, but you are grateful for it. You think about the hovel, now a small, domed shape under a thick layer of snow, and you know that the snow is a kind of extra blanket, a gift from nature that helps to keep your family warm. The winter is not a simple enemy, it is a complex force with many faces, and you must learn to read its subtle language. A quirky tidbit is that in some northern regions, where the snow was particularly deep and long-lasting, peasants would dig tunnels through the snow to get from one hovel to another. These snow tunnels were a way of creating a community, a kind of hidden network of warmth and connection under the white blanket of winter. Historians still argue whether this was a common practice or a sign of extreme weather conditions, but the image of a hidden world under the snow is a powerful one. You just know that your small, shoveled paths are enough to connect you to your family and your neighbors. As you stand in the cold, you feel the wind pick up, a mournful moan that whistles through the trees. The snow begins to fall again, a fine, powdery substance that stings your cheeks. You know that you have to hurry. You grab a few logs from the woodpile and hurry back to your hovel. Your boots crunching in the snow, you enter your home, the warmth a welcome relief, and you watch the snow fall from the small, shuttered window. You see the world outside disappearing under a thick, white blanket, and you feel a sense of both dread and security. The snow is a powerful force, and it has the power to both trap you and to protect you. The winter is a time of waiting, but it is also a time of profound paradox, where your greatest enemy is also your greatest ally. The snow has insulated your home, but it has created a new daily struggle, the frozen water. The well in the center of the village is now a solid sheet of ice, and the stream that runs through your fields is an unyielding, crystalline mass. You and your family must now brave the cold every day to get water, a task that is as backbreaking as it is crucial. You bundle up, your breath a cloud in the frigid air, and you make your way to the frozen stream, a large wooden bucket in your hand. The sound of the wind is the only thing that breaks the silence. The stream is a formidable barrier, the ice is thick, and you must use a pickaxe, a heavy and clumsy tool, to break through it. The work is slow and difficult. The sound of the axe hitting the ice a loud, jarring crack that echoes through the quiet village. A mainstream historical fact is that this daily chore of breaking ice for water was a universal reality for peasants in cold climates. Without fresh water, you cannot cook, you cannot drink, and your very survival is at risk. It's a simple, profound truth that you face every day. You and your neighbor, old Thomas, work together, taking turns with the axe. The work is a slow, methodical process, a test of strength and endurance. You strike the ice with the axe, and a small crack appears. You strike it again, and the crack widens. Finally, with a final, powerful swing, you break through, and a small pool of dark, cold water appears. You and Thomas share a look of triumph, a silent acknowledgement of a hard-won victory. You dip your bucket into the water, and the cold seeps through the wood, a numbing cold that makes your fingers stiff and clumsy. You then begin the slow, arduous walk back to your hovel, the heavy bucket of water a weight that feels as though it will pull your arms from their sockets. A quirky tidbit is that peasants would sometimes place a large stone in their water buckets overnight. The stone, which would sink to the bottom, would prevent the water from freezing solid, making it easier to access in the morning. It was a simple, clever trick born of necessity, a way of saving a small amount of labor and a bit of pain. Historians still argue whether this practice was widespread or a local custom, but you can imagine the sheer relief of a peasant who didn't have to break through a thick layer of ice every morning. You just know that a bit of forward thinking can make a world of difference. As you walk back, you feel the cold wind on your face and the heavy weight of the bucket. You think about the preciousness of water, a resource that you usually take for granted. You enter your hovel, the warmth a welcome relief, and you pour the cold water into a large pot near the fire. The sound is a gentle splash, a quiet promise of life and sustenance. The winter is a time of struggle, but it is also a time of small, profound victories, and getting water is one of them. You watch as the water begins to steam, and you feel a quiet sense of satisfaction. You have survived another day. The cold has been a constant companion, but now it's become something more. The air outside has a new, sharp edge to it, a biting quality that seems to cut right to your bones. This is the deep, cold snap, a period of extreme, unrelenting cold that tests the limits of your endurance. The wind howls outside, a mournful, high-pitched wail that feels like a threat. You and your family are huddled closer to the fire than ever before, a small, fragile knot of humanity against the vast, cold emptiness of the world. A mainstream historical fact is that these deep, cold snaps were a regular occurrence during the Little Ice Age, and they were often a time of great peril for peasants. The cold was so intense that it could cause the very stones of a building to crack, and it was a time when the risk of starvation and hypothermia was at its highest. The fire, your constant companion, is now more crucial than ever. You feed it with your most precious, well-seasoned wood, the logs you have been saving for just this moment. The flames leap and dance, a brilliant, defiant splash of color against the gloom, and you feel a profound sense of gratitude. The heat it provides is a tangible, physical presence, a shield that protects you from the cold that seems to be trying to seep through the very walls of your home. You and your wife take turns sleeping, a hand always near the fire to ensure that it does not go out. You know that if the fire were to die, you would have a few hours, perhaps, before the cold would win. A quirky tidbit is that in some villages, a tradition called fire watch would be instituted during a deep cold snap. The men of the village would take turns watching the communal fire in the center of the village, ensuring that it never went out. This communal fire was a source of warmth and light for the entire community, and its continued burning was a powerful symbol of hope and resilience. Historians still argue whether this was a common practice or a sign of extreme weather, but the idea of a shared fire, a beacon of hope in the darkness, is a powerful one. You just know that your own small fire is enough to keep your family warm. And that is all that matters. As the night deepens, the cold seems to intensify, the wind howls, and you hear the sound of the trees cracking in the distance. A loud, sharp report that feels like a gunshot in the oppressive silence. You pull your cloak tighter around you, and you think about the other families in the village, huddled in their own small, smoky hovels. You are all in this together, a collective of people fighting against a common enemy. The cold is a great equalizer, and it reminds you that the difference between life and death can be as simple as a single piece of wood, a single flame. You look at your family, their faces illuminated by the flickering firelight, and you feel a profound sense of love and protection. You will not let the cold win. Amidst the hardship and the constant threat of the cold, there is still a powerful source of light and hope. The children. You look at your own children, their faces scrubbed clean by the warmth of the fire, and you see them find moments of unbridled joy in the most difficult of circumstances. For them, the deep snow is not a barrier, it's a playground. You watch as your son and daughter, bundled in their rough woolen tunics, play a simple game in the small, shoveled-out space in front of your hovel. They are building a snow fort, their small hands patting the snow into a crude, protective wall. A mainstream historical fact is that children, even in the harsh realities of the Middle Ages, were still children. They found ways to play, to laugh, and to learn, often using the natural world as their playground. Their games were simple, running, throwing snowballs, and building snow figures, but they were a crucial part of their development and their resilience. You watch them, and you feel a profound sense of peace. Their laughter is a bright, defiant sound that breaks through the oppressive silence of the winter. They are not old enough to understand the constant worry about food or the fear of a sickness. And in their innocence, they are a powerful reminder of the simple joys of life. You see them throw a snowball at each other, and a look of pure, unadulterated joy crosses your son's face. It's a small moment, a fleeting one, but it is enough to warm your heart more than the fire ever could. You think about how you, as a child, played the same games, and you feel a connection to your own past and to the long, unbroken chain of childhoods that have survived the winter. A quirky tidbit is that children in the Middle Ages would often make their own toys from the natural world around them. They would carve small animals out of wood, make dolls out of corn husks and straw, and use stones and sticks for their games. These simple, handmade toys were a reflection of their creativity and their ability to find joy in a world of scarcity. Historians still argue whether the lack of manufactured toys was a source of hardship or if it fostered a greater sense of ingenuity and creativity in children. You just know that your son's small, carved horse, a toy he made himself from a piece of scrap wood, is one of his most prized possessions. As the sun sets, you call your children in, their faces red from the cold and their bodies tired but happy. They tumble into the hovel, bringing a gust of cold air and the clean, fresh smell of snow with them. They huddle by the fire, their clothes slowly steaming in the warmth, and they tell you about their game. Their voices full of a childlike wonder that you have not felt for a very long time. You look at them, and you feel a profound sense of hope. The winter is a time of struggle, but it is also a time of small, profound moments of joy. And your children are a powerful reminder of that. They are the future, the promise of the spring to come. And you will do everything in your power to see them through this winter, and every winter after. As you watch your children find joy in the snow, you are also keenly aware of the other end of the life cycle, The elderly and the frail in the village are the most vulnerable to the winter's harsh reality. You think of old Margaret, who, as you remember, did not survive the last winter's fever. You also think of Thomas's wife, whose cough, you've noticed, has grown more persistent and deep. Their struggle is a quiet one, a constant battle against the cold and the weakness of their own bodies. You see the wisdom and strength in their faces, a testament to a lifetime of survival. But you also see the fragile light of life flickering in their eyes. A mainstream historical fact is that the elderly and the sick were at a significantly higher risk of mortality during the winter months, with no proper medicine, limited food, and the constant threat of cold. A person who was already weak or old was often the first to succumb. You and your family, like all families in the village, do what you can. You share a few pieces of firewood with an old, widowed man who lives nearby, and your wife takes a small bowl of her daily porridge to a sick neighbour. This is not charity, it is a shared social contract, a recognition that a community is only as strong as its weakest members. You know that one day you and your wife will be the old ones, and you hope that the younger generation will remember their duty to you. A quirky tidbit is that in some villages, a tradition called the blessing of the hearth would be performed by the elders. They would use a special herbal mixture to bless the fire, and they would pray for the health and safety of the entire community. It was a powerful, symbolic act, a way of giving the elderly a sense of purpose and importance in a society that often valued physical strength above all else. Historians still argue whether these ceremonies were a form of spiritual comfort or a way of passing down crucial knowledge about fire management and herbal medicine. You just know that old Thomas's wife, when she was able, would bless their fire every night, and you can still hear her soft, lilting voice in your memory. As the days get shorter, you feel the weight of this shared vulnerability. You and your neighbours are all on a journey, a long and difficult pilgrimage through the winter, and some of you will not make it to the end. The silence of the village feels heavier, the laughter of the children feels more precious, and the warmth of the fire feels more profound. The winter is a time of endurance, but it is also a time of loss. You look at your own parents, their faces now lined with the wisdom of 1,000 winters, and you feel a profound sense of love and fear. You will do everything you can to see them through this winter, but you know that ultimately, you are all in the hands of a power far greater than yourselves. While your daily struggle is with the mud, the cold, and the endless work, your existence is ultimately tied to a figure who lives in a world you can barely imagine. The Lord of the Manor, a distant and powerful figure, is a constant presence in your life, even in the deepest part of winter. You owe him your labour, your fealty, and a portion of your harvest. His actions, or inactions, can be the difference between life and death for the entire village. A mainstream historical fact is that the feudal system, which governed medieval Europe, made peasants beholden to a lord who owned the land they worked. This relationship was a complex web of duties and protections, and the winter was often a time when that relationship was tested. You think about the Lord's Manor, a large stone building on the other side of the valley. You have never been inside, but you have seen it from a distance, a solid, impenetrable fortress against the elements. You know that his hearths are large and well stocked with firewood. His larder is full of fine foods, and his family is warm and well fed. The contrast between your life and his is a stark and constant reality. You are, in a very real sense, a small part of his wealth, a tiny piece of the vast engine that sustains his life of luxury. A quirky tidbit is that some feudal contracts included a provision for the lord to provide his peasants with a small amount of food or fuel during a particularly harsh winter. This was not an act of charity, it was a pragmatic choice. A lord who lost his peasants to starvation or cold would have no one to work his land in the spring, and his wealth would dry up. Historians still argue whether this was a common provision or a rare act of mercy, but the idea of a lord's self-interest being a lifeline for his peasants is a powerful one. You just know that your lord has not made such a provision, and you feel a quiet resentment as the wind howls outside. You think about the Lord, safe in his manor, and you feel a complex mixture of anger and resignation. You know that you are at his mercy, and that your life is a commodity to him, but you also know that you are a part of a larger, more resilient community. a group of people who have survived 1,000 winters without his help. The winter is a time of struggle, but it is also a time of quiet defiance. You are not a lord, but you are a survivor. And that is a kind of power that he will never understand. You look at your family, huddled by the fire, and you know that your true loyalty is not to a distant lord, but to them, and to the community that will get you through this long, dark winter. The village is a small island of life in a vast, cold ocean of darkness, and the dangers of the world outside do not disappear just because it is winter. In fact, the cold makes them more pronounced. You hear the howl of a wolf in the distance, a long, mournful sound that sends a shiver down your spine. This is not a fantasy, it is a very real threat. A mainstream historical fact is that wolves, driven to desperation by hunger, were a constant danger to medieval villages, and winter was a time when they would often come closer to human settlements in search of food. To combat this, villages would often have a small, informal patrol, a few men who would take turns watching the village at night, listening for the telltale sounds of a predator. You take your turn on the patrol, a heavy, wooden club in your hand. The air is so cold it hurts to breathe, and the snow crunches loudly under your feet. The moon, a cold, indifferent orb in the sky, casts long, eerie shadows on the snow. You walk the perimeter of the village, your eyes and ears alert to every sound. The wind moans through the trees, and the silence is so profound it's unsettling. You feel a profound sense of responsibility, a heavy weight on your shoulders. You are not just protecting your own family, you are protecting the entire village, the old and the young, the sick and the healthy. A quirky tidbit is that peasants would sometimes use a kind of primitive wolf alarm, a series of hollowed-out gourds or horns that would be set up on a fence or a wall. When the wind blew, the horns would make a low, moaning sound that was believed to scare away wolves and other predators. It was a simple, clever, and probably ineffective way of making themselves feel a bit safer. Historians still argue whether these alarms were a widespread practice or a sign of a particular village's fear. But you can imagine the quiet comfort of a peasant who believed that a few moaning horns were enough to keep his family safe. As you walk, you think about the other dangers of the winter. Desperate bandits, driven by hunger, would often prey on isolated villages. A small, informal patrol was a way of showing strength, of showing that the village would not be an easy target. You see the flickering light of a hearth in a neighbour's hovel, and you feel a sense of connection. You are all in this together. A collective of people who have come together to survive. You finish your patrol, your body tired and cold, and you return to your hovel. The warmth, a welcome relief. You look at your family, sleeping peacefully by the fire, and you know that you have done your job. The winter is a time of struggle, but it is also a time of quiet courage, a time when ordinary men become protectors and guardians of their community. The food stores are dwindling, the salted meat has been rationed to a few precious pieces, and the porridge has become thinner and less filling. The gnawing emptiness in your stomach is no longer a low-level hum, it's a constant, demanding presence. The time for quiet waiting is over. Now is the time for desperate measures. You and a few other men from the village decide to go hunting. This is a risky endeavour, as the deep snow makes tracking and moving difficult, and the risk of hypothermia is high. But the alternative is starvation, and that is a far greater risk. A mainstream historical fact is that hunting and trapping were crucial but often last-ditch efforts for peasants during the winter. They were not permitted to hunt large game, which was reserved for the lord, so they focused on small animals like rabbits, squirrels, and birds. These small animals were a vital source of protein and fat, and a successful hunt could mean the difference between life and death for a family. You grab your bow and a quiver of arrows. The wooden feathers a familiar weight on your back. You also have a few simple snares, a clever tool for catching rabbits and other small animals. You and your companions trudge through the deep snow, the silence of the forest broken only by the crunch of your boots. The trees are bare, their branches are skeletal filigree against the grey sky, and the air is so cold it makes your teeth ache. You move quietly, your senses alert to every sound, every movement. You spot a rabbit's tracks in the snow, a series of small, delicate imprints that are a promise of a meal. You follow the tracks, your heart beating a little faster, your mind focused on the task at hand. You and your companions set a few snares, a silent, patient trap that you hope will catch a meal. A quirky tidbit is that medieval peasants would sometimes use a kind of primitive call to attract rabbits and other small animals. They would use a hollowed-out piece of wood or a blade of grass to mimic the sound of an animal in distress. A kind of primitive hunting call that was often passed down from father to son. Historians still argue whether this was a widespread practice or a sign of a particularly clever hunter. But the idea of using sound to hunt is a powerful one. You, however, rely on your knowledge of the forest, on the signs and signals that you have learned over a lifetime of living on the land. As the sun begins to set, a weak and watery orb in the sky, you and your companions have had some success. You have a few snares with a rabbit in them, and you have managed to shoot a few birds with your bow. It's not a feast, but it is enough to keep your family from starving for a few more days. You feel a profound sense of relief. A heavy weight lifting from your shoulders, you trudge back to the village, the weight of the game a welcome burden on your back. You enter your hovel, the warmth a welcome relief, and you show your wife the day's catch. She smiles, a look of profound gratitude on her face. The winter is a time of struggle, but it is also a time of quiet courage and resourcefulness. You have faced the hunger and you have won. For now, the hunting has provided a brief respite, but the hunger has returned, and it's a more demanding, insistent presence than before. You have reached the deepest, darkest part of winter, the period where the cold is at its most profound and the food stores are at their lowest. Morale in the village is a fragile thing, a flickering candle in a vast, dark room. The laughter of the children has become less frequent, the conversations more subdued, and the faces of your neighbours are etched with a weariness that goes beyond simple fatigue. The hope of spring, once a distant but tangible promise, now feels like a myth, a fairy tale you tell your children to help them get through the night. A mainstream historical fact is that the period just before the spring equinox, often called the Hungry Gap, was the most dangerous and deadly part of the year for peasants. Food stores were at their lowest, the weather was often at its most brutal, and the risk of starvation and disease was at its highest. You feel the truth of this in your bones. The porridge has become a thin, watery gruel, and the bread is a hard, dry crust that you must soak in water to eat. The constant, low-level hunger is now a constant, gnawing pain that makes it difficult to think or to move. You feel like a ghost, a shadow of your former self, a body on the absolute brink of its endurance. A quirky tidbit is that in some villages, a tradition called the telling of the hunger stones would be observed. These were large stones in a river or a stream that were only visible during a severe drought. The elders of the village would gather around the stones and tell stories of the past famines, a way of reminding the community of their shared history and their shared struggle. It was a kind of macabre but powerful ritual, a way of giving a tangible shape to the abstract fear of starvation. Historians still argue whether this was a common practice or a myth, but the idea of a physical object that represents a shared history of struggle is a powerful one. You just know that your own stomach is a constant reminder of the hunger that has shaped your life and the lives of your ancestors. As you sit by the fire, you watch the flames, and you feel a profound sense of hopelessness. The winter has been a long and brutal journey, and you are not sure if you have the strength to make it to the end. You look at your family, their faces gaunt and pale, and you feel the immense weight of your responsibility. You are the keeper of their survival, and you are failing. The wind howls outside, a mournful, relentless sound, and you feel the cold seep through the walls. The winter is a time of struggle, but it is also a time of despair, a time when the hope of spring feels like a distant, impossible dream. You close your eyes, and you dream of the warmth of the spring sun on your skin, a memory that feels as though it belongs to another lifetime. Just as your hope is at its lowest, a small and profound shift occurs. The calendar says it is Candlemas, a day that, in a purely religious sense, marks the purification of the Virgin Mary. But for you, the peasant, it means something far more tangible. It is a sign that the longest, darkest part of the winter is over. You walk out into the cold, your breath a cloud in the frigid air, and you notice something that makes your heart beat a little faster. The sun, though still weak and watery, is setting a little later than it did yesterday. The days are getting longer. This is not a guess. It's a fact you can feel in your very bones. This is the turning point. A mainstream historical fact is that Candlemas, which falls on February the 2nd, was a crucial date in the medieval calendar. It was a day when candles were blessed in the church, and it was a day that marked a symbolic turning point in the winter. The old saying, "If Candlemas be fair and bright, winter will have another flight. If Candlemas brings clouds and rain, winter is gone and will not come again," was a popular belief that spoke to the deep connection between faith, folk tradition, and the rhythms of the natural world. You don't know if it's going to be fair and bright, but you know that the sun is staying a little longer, and that is all the hope you need. You and your neighbours gather at the church, a small, solemn procession of bundled figures. The candles are lit, their small flames are warm, flickering light against the gloom. The priest blesses them, and you take a small, blessed candle home with you. It is a symbol of the light returning, a physical representation of the hope that is now slowly beginning to grow in your heart. You feel a quiet sense of solidarity with your neighbours, a shared sense of relief that the worst of the winter is now, hopefully, behind you. The air in the church feels a little less cold, the prayers a little more fervent, and the sense of community a little more profound. A quirky tidbit is that in some villages, a tradition of eating pancakes on Candlemas was observed. These were simple, flat cakes made from flour, water, and perhaps a bit of saved butter or rendered fat, a rare treat in the lean days of winter. The round shape and golden colour of the pancakes were meant to symbolise the sun returning. A final, defiant feast before the last, difficult stretch of winter. Historians still argue whether this was a widespread practice or a local custom, but the idea of eating a meal that represents the sun is a powerful one. You just know that your wife is carefully making a small, flat cake from the last of your flour, and the smell is a rare, welcome aroma in your hovel. As you eat, you feel a profound sense of peace. The winter is not over, but the end is now in sight, and that is a kind of hope that can sustain you through the final, difficult days. The hope of Candlemas is a powerful thing, but it is not a magic wand. The winter, you soon discover, is not willing to let go easily. The days may be getting longer, but the cold is still a constant, brutal presence. The snow, which has been your silent ally, is now a stubborn enemy, a thick, unyielding blanket that shows no sign of melting. This is the spring is a snail period of the year, a long, agonizing crawl towards the first signs of new life. You look out your shuttered window, and the world is still a stark, white landscape. The promise of spring feels like a lie, a cruel joke played by the heavens. A mainstream historical fact is that the late winter and early spring were often just as deadly as the deepest part of the year. Food stores were at their lowest, and the risk of disease was still high. The cold could be just as brutal, and the new, thawed mud and constant rain could make life just as miserable as the snow. You feel this in your bones. The wind howls, a cold, wet sound, and you feel the dampness seep into your clothes and your very bones. You find yourself sitting by the fire, your gaze lost in the hypnotic dance of the flames, your mind a quiet place of waiting and patience. The winter is a long, slow marathon, and you are in the final, most difficult stretch. A quirky tidbit is that in some villages, a tradition called the beating of the bounds would be observed in late winter. The villagers would walk the perimeter of their land, a kind of ritualistic marking of the boundaries before the spring planting. It was a way of reasserting their claim to the land and a way of reminding themselves of the work that was to come. Historians still argue whether this was a holdover from pagan rituals or a practical way of checking on the fences and boundaries before the spring work began. You just know that the thought of walking the perimeter of your land, of feeling the frozen dirt under your feet, is a powerful and comforting thought. It's a promise of the work to come, a reminder that the world will soon come alive again. As the days crawl by, you feel a profound sense of weariness, the constant hunger, the unrelenting cold, and the sheer monotony of your daily life have taken a toll. You are a less vibrant version of your former self, a body on the brink of its endurance, but you also feel a new, quiet sense of hope. You watch as a small bird, a tiny, defiant splash of colour against the white snow, lands on the branch of a tree near your hovel. It sings a simple, beautiful song, a sound that you have not heard for many, many months. The sound is a dagger in your heart, a reminder that the world is still alive, and that spring, though a snail, is still on its way. You close your eyes, and you listen to the song, and you feel a profound sense of peace. You know that you have almost made it. The bird's song was a promise, and now you see the first, tentative signs of it coming true. The air, though still cold, has a different quality to it. A faint, earthy scent of damp soil and melting snow. You step outside, and you notice that the snow is no longer a pristine, uniform blanket. It has become granular and grey, a sign that it is slowly, begrudgingly giving way to the sun's returning power. A mainstream historical fact is that the first signs of thaw were a moment of immense relief and hope for medieval peasants. It was a tangible sign that the long, brutal winter was finally losing its grip, and that the new agricultural year was just around the corner. You walk to the edge of your land, and you see a small patch of bare earth, a dark, muddy island in a sea of white. You reach down and touch it, and you feel the cold, wet soil. A profound and beautiful sensation. You see a tiny, green shoot, a small, defiant burst of life that has pushed its way through the frozen ground. It's a miracle. A small and profound victory that makes your heart swell with a feeling you haven't felt for months. Hope. This is not a guess, it's a certainty. The spring is coming. You also notice the stream, which has been a solid sheet of ice for months, is now a slow, gurgling trickle. The sound is a quiet, steady promise of new life. The ice is cracking and breaking apart, and the water is slowly beginning to flow again. A quirky tidbit is that in some villages, a tradition called the blessing of the water would be performed at the first sign of a thaw. The priest would bless the newly flowing water, and the villagers would fill a bucket with the blessed water and take it home. A symbol of new life and the return of the natural world. Historians still argue whether this was a widespread practice or a local custom, but the idea of blessing the water that will sustain you through the coming year is a powerful one. You walk back to your hovel, your heart full of a feeling you have not felt for a very long time. You show your wife the tiny, green shoot, and her face lights up with a smile that you haven't seen since the autumn. The children run to the patch of bare earth, their laughter a bright, hopeful sound. The winter is not over, but the end is now in sight, and the promise of a new spring is a powerful force that can sustain you through the final, difficult days. You look out your window, and you see a world that is slowly, beautifully coming back to life, and you know that you have almost made it. The first signs of thaw are a promise, but they are also a call to action. The quiet, hibernating rhythm of winter is now giving way to a new, frantic energy. You and your neighbours begin the mental and physical preparations for the new agricultural year. You sharpen your tools, mend your fences, and begin the slow, arduous work of clearing the fields of the winter's debris. A mainstream historical fact is that this period, between the thaw and the first planting, was a crucial time for peasants. A late start to the planting season could have disastrous consequences for the harvest, so every day was precious. Every bit of work was a vital step towards the new year. You and your son take your tools to the blacksmith's forge, the sound of his hammer a constant, reassuring rhythm in the air. He sharpens your hoe and your scythe, the metal singing as he works. You feel a profound sense of gratitude for his skill and for the tools that he provides. You also walk the perimeter of your land, carefully inspecting the fences and the boundaries, making sure they are secure. You find a few broken pieces of wood, a few weak spots, and you begin the work of repairing them. This is not just a chore, it is a ritual, a way of reasserting your claim to the land and a way of preparing for the work to come. A quirky tidbit is that in some villages, A tradition called the sowing of the seeds would be observed in late winter. The villagers would take a few of their precious seeds from the last harvest and would plant them in a small, consecrated patch of earth. It was a symbolic act, a way of asking the heavens for a bountiful harvest, and a way of giving a tangible shape to their hopes for the new year. Historians still argue whether this was a widespread practice or a local custom, but the idea of planting a few seeds in the cold, hard ground and hoping for a miracle is a powerful one. As you work, you feel a new energy, a new sense of purpose. The hunger is still a constant presence, and the cold is still a reality. But the work is a powerful distraction. You are no longer just surviving, you are preparing to live again. The rhythm of your life, which has been a slow, quiet hum for months, is now a powerful, steady beat. You look at your land, and you see not a barren, frozen landscape, but a promise of new life, a canvas that you will soon begin to paint. The winter is a long, difficult journey, but you have almost made it to the end, and the promise of a new spring, of a new harvest, is a powerful force that can sustain you through the final, difficult days. The promise of spring is in the air, but the reality of your larder is grim. This is the end of the stores, the final, critical period where food supplies are running dangerously low. The porridge has become a watery gruel, and the bread is a hard, dry crust that you must soak in water to eat. The gnawing emptiness in your stomach is a constant, demanding presence, and you feel the effects of the hunger in every movement, every thought. You are a body on the brink, a human being operating on the absolute minimum of fuel, and the risk of famine is a terrifying, tangible reality. A mainstream historical fact is that the Hungry Gap was a time of immense peril for peasants. Food prices, even for the most basic grains, would skyrocket, and the poor and the weak would often succumb to starvation and disease. You feel the truth of this in your bones. Your family's last piece of salted pork is now a distant memory, and you are living on the thinnest of gruel. A desperate attempt to stretch the last of your grain until the new harvest. You are a living testament to the fragility of your existence, a body that has been pushed to the absolute brink of its endurance. You walk to the granary, the wooden shed that holds the last of your grain, and you see that it is almost empty. The floor is covered in a fine layer of dust and a few stray kernels. A heartbreaking sight. You sweep up every single kernel, a meticulous and desperate act of preservation. A quirky tidbit is that in some villages, a tradition called the blessing of the last bread would be observed. The villagers would take the last of their flour and would bake a single, large loaf of bread. The loaf would be blessed and then divided among the entire community, a symbolic act of shared struggle and shared hope. Historians still argue whether this was a widespread practice or a sign of extreme poverty. But the idea of a shared, final meal is a powerful one. As you walk back to your hovel, your stomach rumbling a quiet complaint, you see your neighbours, their faces etched with the same hunger and weariness. You are all in this together, a collective of people on the absolute brink of starvation, but you also see a new sense of resolve in their faces, a grim determination that speaks of a powerful, unbroken spirit. The hunger is a terrible enemy, but it has also forged a powerful sense of community and resilience. The winter has pushed you to the absolute brink of your endurance, but it has not broken you. You look out your window, and you see a world that is still barren and cold, but you also see a promise of new life, a hint of green that is slowly, defiantly pushing its way through the frozen ground. The winter has been a long and brutal journey, but you have almost made it to the end. The days are now noticeably longer. The air is full of the scent of damp earth and the sound of melting snow, and you can see a hint of green on the trees. This is the spring equinox, a day that marks the official arrival of spring. You and your family, along with the entire village, gather on the village green, the mud and grass now visible beneath the last stubborn patches of snow. This is not a day for feasting. It is a day for quiet celebration, a moment of profound relief and gratitude. A mainstream historical fact is that the spring equinox was a crucial moment in the peasant calendar, a day that marked the end of the winter and the beginning of a new agricultural year. It was a time for hope, for renewal, and for a collective sense of relief. The mood on the village green is one of quiet joy. There is no wild dancing or drunken revelry. Instead, there is a sense of shared triumph, a silent acknowledgement that you have all survived. You see old Thomas, his face still thin from the hunger, standing next to his wife, her cough now a little less persistent. They share a look, a quiet nod that speaks of a long, difficult journey and a hard-won victory. The children, their faces thin but their eyes bright, chase each other in the mud, their laughter a joyful sound that feels as though it is ringing out across the whole valley. A quirky tidbit is that in some villages, a tradition called the turning of the wheel would be observed on the spring equinox. The villagers would roll a large wooden wheel, often wrapped in straw and set on fire, down a hill. The wheel was meant to symbolize the sun's return, and its rolling was a kind of prayer for a good harvest. Historians still argue whether this was a widespread practice or a local custom, but the image of a burning wheel rolling down a hill, a symbol of light and warmth returning to the world, is a powerful one. As you stand on the village green, you feel the sun on your skin, and the sensation is so profound and so beautiful it almost brings tears to your eyes. The sun is no longer a distant, watery orb. It is a warm, powerful presence, a promise of new life. You feel the cold seeping out of your bones, replaced by a new sense of energy and purpose. The winter has been a long and brutal journey, but you have made it to the end, and the promise of a new spring is a powerful force that can sustain you through the final, difficult days. You look at your family, their faces now full of a new sense of hope, and you feel a profound sense of peace. The winter is over, the spring has begun, the winter is over, and the time for waiting is done. Now is the time for action. The promise of spring, once a distant dream, is now a tangible reality. And the call of the land is a powerful, demanding presence. You and your neighbours, a collective of people who have survived the long, dark winter, gather at the edge of the fields. Your tools, sharpened and mended during the long, dark, quiet months, are in your hands, and you feel a new sense of purpose and a new sense of strength. This is the first ploughing, a crucial and profound moment that marks the beginning of a new agricultural year. A mainstream historical fact is that ploughing was the most important and time-consuming task of the peasant year. It was a back-breaking, the communal effort that was essential to the success of the new harvest. You and your neighbour, old Thomas, hitch a few oxen to a heavy, wooden plough, and you begin the slow, arduous work of turning the soil. The ground is hard and cold, and the plough cuts through it with a deep, resonant sound. The work is difficult, and you feel the strain in your arms and your back. But you are not just ploughing the ground, you are ploughing in the promise of a new harvest, a new life. The smell of the turned earth, a deep, earthy scent of new life and old memories, is a powerful and beautiful thing. You feel a profound sense of connection to the land, a sense of belonging that is deeper and more profound than any feudal contract. A quirky tidbit is that in some villages, a tradition called the blessing of the plough would be observed before the first ploughing. The priest would bless the plough and the oxen, and the villagers would say a prayer for a good harvest. It was a way of giving a sacred dimension to the work of the land, a way of asking the heavens for a bounty that would sustain them through the coming year. Historians still argue whether this was a widespread practice or a local custom, but the idea of blessing the tools and the animals that will provide your sustenance is a powerful one. As you work, the sun shines down on your back, a warm and welcome presence. You feel the cold seeping out of your bones, and you feel a new sense of energy and a new sense of strength. The hunger is still a constant presence, but the work is a powerful distraction. You are no longer a ghost, you are a man, a farmer, a provider. You look at your land, and you see not a barren, frozen landscape, but a promise of new life, a canvas that you will soon begin to paint. The winter has been a long and brutal journey, but you have made it to the end, and the promise of a new spring, of a new harvest, is a powerful force that can sustain you through the final, difficult days. You look at your family, and you feel a profound sense of peace. The winter is over, the spring has begun, the first ploughing is done, the seeds are in the ground, and the village is now a place of frantic, joyful energy. As you take a moment to rest, leaning on the handle of your hoe, you find yourself looking back on the long, difficult winter you have just survived. It's a memory that feels both distant and immediate, a part of you that has been forged in the crucible of cold and hunger. You think about the first frost, the frantic harvest, the long, dark nights, and the constant fear of sickness. You remember the communal feast, the quiet camaraderie of the village, and the small, profound victories of mending a shoe or finding a few pieces of firewood. These memories are not just a record of your past, they are a blueprint for your future. A mainstream historical fact is that the collective memory of a harsh winter was a powerful force in medieval villages. It was a shared experience that bonded the community together and served as a reminder of their shared vulnerability and their shared strength. The stories of the winter, the time a wolf came to the village, the time a child survived a fever, the time the river froze solid, were passed down from one generation to the next. A kind of oral history that served as a moral compass and a guide for future winters. You find yourself telling your children a story about the deep, cold snap, the one you had to take turns keeping the fire alive, and you see their eyes grow wide with a mixture of fear and admiration. You are not just telling them a story, you are passing on a legacy of resilience and survival. You also think about the things you've learned. You've learned the true meaning of scarcity, the value of a single piece of wood, the profound power of a shared meal. You've learned the importance of community, the way a village can come together to face a common enemy. You've learned the patience of a body in hibernation, the quiet endurance of a mind waiting for the sun to return. The winter has been a difficult teacher, but you have learned its lessons well. A quirky tidbit is that some historians believe that the collective experience of surviving a harsh winter contributed to the development of a unique kind of peasant humor, a gentle, dark wit that was a way of coping with the immense hardships of their lives. A joke about a frozen turnip or a thin gruel might seem crude to us, but it was a way of taking back a bit of power from the overwhelming forces of nature. Historians still argue about the nature and extent of peasant humor, but you just know that a shared laugh can be a powerful medicine against the cold and the hunger. As you stand in the field, the warm sun on your back and the smell of new life in the air, you feel a profound sense of peace. The winter has been a long and brutal journey, but you have made it to the end, and the lessons you have learned will last a lifetime. You look at your land, and you see not just a field of dirt, but a story of a long and difficult journey, a testament to the strength and resilience of a community that refused to be broken. The sun is warm on your skin, and the air is alive with the hum of insects and the sound of your neighbors' voices. The fields are a canvas of new life, and the promise of the coming harvest is a tangible, powerful presence. You are no longer just a survivor, you are a participant in the great cycle of life and death, of winter and spring. As you look out over your land, you realize that the winter was not an ending, but a pause, a moment of profound stasis before the world began anew. You and your family, and your entire village, are a part of this great, cosmic dance, and you will continue to be a part of it for generations to come. A mainstream historical fact is that the agricultural year for a peasant was a constant, repetitive cycle. The hard work of spring planting would lead to the long, difficult toil of summer, which would then lead to the frantic, celebratory harvest of autumn, and then, inevitably, the cold and the darkness would return, and the cycle would begin anew. There was no beginning and no end, only a continuous, unbroken chain of life, death, and rebirth. You feel this in your bones. The hunger of the winter has been replaced by the aches and pains of the spring work, but you are not complaining. You are grateful for the pain, for it is a sign of life, a sign of work, a sign of the promise of a future. A quirky tidbit is that medieval peasants would sometimes use a kind of primitive crop rotation to keep the soil fertile. They would plant different crops in different fields each year, a simple but effective way of ensuring that the land would continue to provide for them. Historians still argue about the extent of this practice and whether it was a conscious, organized system or an organic response to the demands of the land, but you just know that a bit of forward thinking can make a world of difference. As the sun sets, casting a golden light on the newly ploughed fields, you walk back to your hovel. The air is still cool, but it is a gentle, welcome cool, not the biting cold of the winter. You enter your home, and you are no longer a ghost. You are a man, a farmer, a provider. You look at your family, their faces full of a new sense of hope, and you feel a profound sense of peace. The winter has been a long and brutal journey, but you have made it to the end, and the lessons you have learned will last a lifetime. You close your eyes, and you dream of the warmth of the summer sun on your skin, a dream of a future that is now, finally, within your grasp. Now, as the warmth of your hearth fades into a gentle amber glow, and the sounds of the fields give way to the soft hum of the night, you can let the long, arduous journey of the peasant's winter recede into memory. The sun has set, the day's work is done, and the world is quiet. The fire is banked, the animals are safe, and the long, difficult wait for spring is finally over. The feeling of the soft straw beneath you and the warmth of your blankets are a profound comfort, a reward for a long, hard-fought battle. You can let the worries of hunger and cold drift away. Just like the last wisps of smoke from the hearth, you are safe, you are warm. The world outside can wait until the morning. All you have to do now is breathe, slowly, deeply, and let the quiet, peaceful darkness take you. End of script. Sweet dreams.